They say a wedding is the happiest day of a girl's life, but as I stood behind those heavy oak doors, the silence beside me felt like a physical weight. My mother wasn't there. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. But as the music started, a shadow stepped out from the corner of my eye, someone I never expected. And in that moment, I realized the woman who raised me had been hiding a secret that was about to shatter everything. The white lace of my dress felt like it was suffocating me. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror of the bridal suite, but I didn't recognize the woman looking back. My name is Lily Rose, and today was supposed to be the beginning of my forever. Instead, it felt like the final chapter of a very long, very painful book. I checked my phone one last time. Nothing. No text, no missed calls, just a cold, glowing screen. My mother, Sarah, had stayed true to her word. 2 weeks ago, over a dinner that ended in broken glass and shouted regrets, she told me that if I went through with this wedding, I would be dead to her. She told me she wouldn't walk me down the aisle, and she wouldn't be sitting in the front row. I thought she was bluffing. I thought a mother's love had limits, but surely those limits didn't include abandoning her only daughter on her wedding day. I was wrong. Lily, it's time. The voice belonged to Elena, my maid of honor. She looked at me with those pitying eyes, the kind of look you give someone who just lost a limb. She knew. Everyone knew. The father part of the program was blank, and the mother of the bride's seat in the chapel was destined to stay empty. I'm ready, I lied. My voice cracked. I grabbed my bouquet, the stems of the white roses digging into my palms. I needed that pain. It was the only thing keeping me grounded. As we walked toward the back of the church, the scent of incense and old wood filled my lungs. The guests were already seated. I could hear the low hum of their chatter, the occasional laugh that felt like a needle prick against my skin. They were all wondering. They were all waiting to see how Lily Rose would handle the humiliation of walking herself down the aisle, because her own flesh and blood couldn't stand the sight of her choice. I reached the doors. The wedding coordinator, a woman who had been far too cheerful all morning, gave me a somber nod. She reached for the handles. "Wait," I whispered. My heart was drumming a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. I looked to my left. The spot where my mother should have been standing was a void of cold air. I felt a tear threaten to spill, but I blinked it back. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of ruined makeup. "Is everything okay, Lily?" the coordinator asked, her hand pausing on the brass handle. I need a second." I turned away from the doors, leaning my head against the cool stone wall. I remembered the way my mother looked when I first showed her the ring. Most mothers cry tears of joy. Mine had gone pale, her hand trembling as she set her wineglass down. "You don't know what you're doing, Lily," she had whispered. "He isn't who you think he is, and if you do this, you do it alone." I had dismissed it as her usual controlling behavior. She never liked anyone I dated. She was protective to a fault, or so I thought. But the venom in her voice that night was different. It wasn't just dislike, it was fear. The organ music began to swell, canon in D, the classic, beautiful, haunting signal that the bride was arriving. "Lily, we have to go," Elena whispered, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I straightened my veil. I took a deep breath, ready to face the pews of judgmental eyes. I signaled the coordinator. The doors creaked open. The light from the chapel was blinding for a split second. I saw the blurred faces of 100 people turning in unison. I saw Mark, my fiancé, standing at the end of the long, floral-lined path. He looked perfect. He looked like the man of my dreams. I took my first step, solo. But before my second foot hit the carpet, a heavy hand landed firmly on my forearm. I turned, expecting a security guard or a late guest. Instead, I was looking into the eyes of a man I hadn't seen in 15 years. A man my mother told me was long gone. A man who wore a suit that looked like it had seen better decades, but whose eyes held a galaxy of regret. "You're not walking this path alone, Lily," he whispered. His voice was like gravel and velvet. "Not today. Not ever again." My breath hitched. Who are you?" He smiled, and I saw my own reflection in the curve of his mouth. "I'm the reason your mother isn't here," he said, "and I'm the only one who can tell you why she's actually terrified of this wedding." The air in the vestibule felt like it had turned to ice. I stared at him, this stranger who carried my own features. My heart wasn't just racing anymore, it was shattering. The organ music continued to swell inside the chapel, mocking the chaos unfolding in the shadows of the entrance. "You're supposed to be dead," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the music. "My mother, she told me you died when I was 5. She showed me the papers, she showed me the grave." The man's grip on my arm was firm but not aggressive. It was the grip of someone holding on for dear life. "She showed you a lie, Lily Rose, a very carefully constructed, very expensive lie. I didn't leave you, I was forced out, and I've spent every day of the last 15 years trying to find a way back without getting you killed in the process." I looked at Mark, waiting at the end of the aisle. He was frowning now, sensing the delay. He took a small step forward, his eyes searching the darkness of the doorway. "Lily?" Elena whispered urgently behind me. "Who is this? We need to move. People are starting to whisper." "Go inside, Elena," I said, my eyes never leaving the stranger. Tell them I need a moment. Tell them the bride has a broken heel. Anything." "But Lily—" "Go," I snapped. Elena ducked inside, and the heavy doors swung shut, muffling the music. It was just me, this ghost of a man, and the suffocating scent of lilies and old secrets. "If you're my father," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and hope, "why now? Why wait until the moment I'm about to start my life with a man I love? Why would you ruin this for me?" "Because the man you think you love is the reason I was sent away," he said, his eyes scanning the room as if he expected someone to jump out of the wood-paneled walls. "Mark isn't just a successful businessman, Lily. Look at his ring, the one on his right hand, the crest." I blinked. I knew the ring. "It was an antique," he said, "a family heirloom." "That crest belongs to a family that destroyed ours," he continued. "Your mother isn't absent because she's angry at you. She's absent because she's terrified. She thinks that by staying away, she can pretend she didn't see the wolf entering the fold. She thinks she's protecting herself, but she's leaving you to the slaughter." I shook my head, stepping back. "No, Mark is kind. He's been my rock. You're lying. You're just a bitter man who wants to destroy what you couldn't have." "Am I?" He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a weathered, yellowed photograph. He handed it to me. In the photo, a young woman, my mother, was laughing. She looked happy, vibrant, and full of life. Beside her stood the man in front of me, looking young and strong. But it was the third person in the photo that made my stomach turn. It was a man, older, with a cold, piercing gaze. He was standing slightly behind them, his hand resting on my mother's shoulder in a way that didn't look friendly. It looked like a claim. "That's Mark's father," I breathed. "His name was Elias," my father said. "And he didn't just want your mother. He wanted the land your grandfather left to us. When I wouldn't sell, he made sure I disappeared. Your mother made a deal with the devil to keep you safe. She agreed to let him manage our lives, as long as you were never touched. But Elias is gone now. And Mark is here to finish what his father started." I looked at the closed doors. Behind them sat 100 guests, a 5-tier cake, and a man I had promised my soul to. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, though my gut was already screaming the truth. "Look at the front row," he said, "the empty seat for your mother. Look under the cushion. She told me she'd leave something there if she ever lost the courage to tell you herself. She knew I was coming today. We spoke last night." I felt like I was moving through deep water. I pushed the doors open, just a crack. The guests were murmuring, the tension in the room thick enough to taste. I slipped through the side aisle, staying in the shadows, moving toward the front where the flowers were piled high. I reached the front row, the seat marked reserved for mother of the bride. My hands shook as I reached under the velvet cushion. My fingers brushed against something cold and sharp. I pulled it out. It wasn't a letter. It was a small, silver key and a thumb drive with a single word written on it in my mother's shaky handwriting. "Run." At that exact moment, the music stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening. I looked up, and Mark was no longer at the altar. He was standing right in front of me, his shadow casting a long, dark shape over the white fabric of my dress. "Finding something interesting, darling?" he asked. His voice was no longer the warm, soothing tone I had fallen in love with. It was cold. It was hollow. I looked back toward the door. My father was gone. "Where is he?" I whispered, clutching the thumb drive so hard the plastic bit into my palm. Who? Mark smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. You've been standing here alone for 5 minutes, Lily. People are starting to think you've had a nervous breakdown. Come. The priest is waiting. Let's finish this. He reached for my hand, the same hand that held the key to my mother's secrets. Mark's hand felt like a shackle around my wrist. His skin was unnaturally cold, contrasting with the heat of the crowded chapel. I looked at the faces in the pews, my friends, my colleagues, and realized that to them, I just looked like a hesitant bride. They couldn't see the thumb drive hidden in my palm, or the ghost of my father standing by the door just moments ago. Mark, you're hurting me, I whispered, trying to pull back. His grip didn't loosen. Instead, he leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. Don't make a scene, Lily Rose. Think of the guest list. Think of your mother. You wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen to her house, would you? My heart stopped. This wasn't a wedding. It was a hostage negotiation. He knew. He knew about the key. He knew my mother was hiding something. I looked down at his right hand. The crest on his ring seemed to glow under the altar lights, a twisted symbol of a legacy I was about to be welded to. What do you want? I breathed. I want what's mine, he said, standing tall and guiding me toward the priest. Now smile. It's our big day. I felt like a puppet as we stood before the officiant. The words being spoken felt like background noise, a rhythmic chanting that meant nothing. My mind was racing back to the thumb drive. Why did my mother wait until the final hour to give me a way out? I looked at the mother of the bride's seat again. It was empty, but in my mind, I could see her sitting there, weeping. She hadn't stayed away because she hated my choice. She stayed away because she couldn't watch me walk into the trap she had been caught in for decades. Do you, Lily Rose, take this man? The priest's voice trailed off in my head. I looked at Mark. He was looking at me with a predatory hunger. He didn't love me. He loved the silence he could buy with my name. He loved the power his father had started and that he was about to solidify. Lily? The priest prompted, his brow furrowing. The silence in the church grew heavy. Someone coughed in the back. My eyes darted to the side exit. If I ran, where would I go? My father was a stranger. My mother was hiding. I was alone in a room full of people who were clapping for my demise. Then, I saw it, a small red light on the lapel of Mark's best man. A camera? No, it was a transmitter. They weren't just recording the wedding. They were monitoring me. Every breath, every hesitation was being watched by someone else. My voice failed. I looked at the thumb drive again, hidden in the folds of my lace dress. I realized I didn't need to run. I needed to fight, but I couldn't do it here, not with Mark holding my hand like a trophy. I do, I finally whispered. The lie tasted like ash. Mark's smile widened, a flash of white teeth that looked more like a snarl. He leaned in to kiss me, and as he did, he whispered, "Good girl. Now give me the drive." I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. The seat, Lily. I saw you. Give it to me, or we won't even make it to the reception. The ceremony ended in a blur. People cheered, petals were thrown, and the happy couple walked down the aisle. But as we reached the back doors, the man who claimed to be my father was nowhere to be seen. Instead, 2 men in dark suits, men who definitely weren't part of the guest list, were standing by the limo. As Mark pushed me toward the car, I realized I had one chance. The reception was at the old Rose Estate, my family's ancestral home, the place my father said Mark's family wanted to steal. There was a library there, with an old computer, hidden away from the modern tech Mark had installed in our apartment. I need to go to the restroom, I said as we reached the car. Later, Mark snapped. Mark, I'm going to be sick. The stress, please. I made my voice sound as fragile as possible. He looked at his watch, then at his men. 2 minutes. Follow her. One of the suits trailed me into the church's small lounge. I locked a stall door and sat down, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the thumb drive. I had to see what was on it. I looked at my phone. I had an adapter in my bridal emergency kit. I plugged it in. The files loaded slowly. My eyes widened as the titles appeared. EliasLedger.pdf, Property Transfer Forced Mauve, and a final folder titled The Truth About the Fire. I clicked the video. It wasn't a legal document. It was a grainy security feed from 20 years ago. I saw a house, my childhood home, engulfed in flames. And there, standing by the tree line, was a man holding a gasoline can. It wasn't Mark's father. It was Mark. He wasn't a child. He was a young man, his face identical to the one waiting for me in the limo outside. The timeline didn't make sense. Mark was supposed to be my age. Unless the man I just married wasn't Mark at all. The screen of my phone felt like a portal into a nightmare. My breath hitched in my throat as I stared at the man in the video. The man I had just pledged my life to was standing at the altar only minutes ago. But the timestamp on this footage was from 2 decades ago. It was impossible. Mark was 32. If this video was 20 years old, he should have been a child. But the man in the flames was already grown. He had the same sharp jawline, the same cold eyes, and the same predatory smile. Then it hit me. The family heirloom ring. The crest. This wasn't a case of a son following in his father's footsteps. This was something much darker. I frantically swiped through the other files in the folder. I opened a scanned document titled, "The Jansen Inheritance." My eyes scanned the text. It spoke of a rare genetic condition, but more importantly, it spoke of a succession of men who used the same identity for generations to maintain control over estates. Mark wasn't just a name, it was a title. The man I married was likely the brother or an older cousin of the Mark my mother had known. They were a collective, a group of men who shared an identity to keep their crimes buried and their wealth growing. "Lily, your 2 minutes are up." The heavy knock on the stall door made me jump. The suit was losing his patience. "I'm coming," I shouted, my voice cracking. I disconnected the drive and shoved it deep into the lining of my dress. I deleted the history on my phone with trembling fingers. I couldn't let them see what I knew. Not yet. I needed to get to the Rose estate. If my mother left me a key, there was something physical there that the digital files couldn't provide. I walked out of the stall, smoothing my hair. The guard looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my hands. "Let's go. The groom doesn't like to be kept waiting." The ride to the estate was silent. Mark sat next to me, staring out the window, his hand resting casually on his lap. He didn't try to touch me, which was almost worse. His silence felt like a coiled snake, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the limo pulled up the long, winding driveway of the Rose estate, my heart sank. This place used to be filled with the sound of my laughter and the smell of my mother's garden. Now, it looked like a fortress. Dark SUVs were parked on the lawn, and men I didn't recognize were patrolling the perimeter. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sterling," Mark said, his voice dripping with a mock sincerity that made my skin crawl. "I want to see my mother," I said, standing my ground as we stepped onto the gravel. "All in good time. First we have a toast to make. The merger is finally complete." "The merger?" I asked. "You mean the theft?" Mark stopped in his tracks. He turned to me, the moonlight catching the silver of his ring. He stepped into my personal space, his breath smelling of expensive bourbon and something metallic. "Words are such dangerous things, Lily. Let's stick to merger. It sounds so much more legal." He led me into the grand ballroom. The reception was in full swing, but it felt wrong. The guests were mostly his associates, men in sharp suits who looked more like soldiers than friends. My few invited guests were huddled in a corner, looking confused and uncomfortable. I looked for the man from the church, my father. He wasn't here. Had I imagined him? Was he just a hallucination brought on by the stress? The key was real. I waited for my moment. When the first dance began, the lights dimmed. The music was a slow, haunting cello piece. Mark pulled me close, his hand gripping my waist tight. "Give me the drive, Lily," he whispered against my hair. "I know you have it. If you give it to me now, I might let your mother live through the night." "I don't have it," I lied, my heart hammering. I dropped it in the church, in the confusion. He squeezed my waist hard enough to bruise. "Don't play games with me." I checked the church. It wasn't there. Then someone else found it, I challenged him, looking directly into his cold eyes. Maybe the man who was standing at the door. Mark's face went pale. For the first time I saw a flicker of genuine fear in him. "What man?" "My father," I said. Before he could respond, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died. A heavy thud echoed from the hallway, followed by the sound of glass shattering. The music stopped with a screech. In the sudden darkness, I felt a hand grab my wrist, not Mark's cold grip, but a warm, calloused hand. "The library," a voice whispered. "Now." It was him. I broke away from Mark in the confusion. The room was a chaos of shouting and flashlights. I ran through the dark hallways I knew by heart, my heavy dress snagging on the corners of antique furniture. I reached the library and slammed the door, locking it behind me. My father was standing by the mahogany desk, a crowbar in his hand. "The desk," he said, pointing to a small, inconspicuous drawer. "The key you found, it's not for a door. It's for the lockbox hidden behind the molding." I pulled the silver key from my dress. My hands were shaking so much I could barely line it up. I found the hidden slot and turned it. A panel popped open, revealing a thick stack of papers and a small, handheld recording device. "Take them," my father said. "This is the evidence of 20 years of identity theft and murder. This is how we end the Sterlings." "Who are you really?" I asked, looking at him in the dim light. "Why did you wait so long?" He looked at me with a sadness that broke my heart. "I'm the man who survived the fire, Lily, but I'm not the only one." The library door groaned under the weight of someone kicking it from the other side. "Lily, open the door." Mark's voice was a roar now. "You have nowhere to go. Go through the servants' passage," my father whispered, pushing a bookshelf aside to reveal a narrow, dark tunnel. "I'll hold them off. Get to the police. Don't look back." "But what about you?" "I've been dead for 20 years, Lily," he said, a grim smile on his face. "It's time I finally rested." I dove into the tunnel, just as the library door burst open. I heard the sound of a struggle, the crash of books, and a single deafening gunshot. The narrow tunnel felt like it was closing in on me. The smell of dust and damp earth filled my nose as I scrambled through the darkness, clutching the documents and the recorder to my chest like a lifeline. Behind me, the muffled sounds of the struggle in the library faded, replaced by the terrifying heartbeat thudding in my own ears. I emerged into the cool night air through a hidden hatch near the old carriage house. My white wedding dress was torn, stained with grease and dirt, no longer a symbol of a union, but a shroud I was shedding. I didn't run to the police, not yet. I knew Mark's reach. He likely had the local precinct in his pocket. I ran to the one place he would never expect. The small, weathered cottage at the edge of the property, the gardener's shed, where my mother used to hide her journals. I fumbled with the recording device, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I hit play. A voice filled the small shed. It wasn't my father's gravelly tone. It was my mother's, younger, trembling with a fear that sounded exactly like mine felt now. "If anyone is listening to this, if Lily is listening, I'm sorry. I thought I could marry into the silence. I thought if I gave them the estate, they would let us live. But the man I married isn't a man. He's a mask. They rotate them. When one Mark grows too old or too noticed, another takes his place. It's a cycle of blood. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a clearing of the ledger. My husband, the real one, died in those flames. The man who came back, he wore his face, but he didn't have his soul." The recording clicked off. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The man in the library wasn't just a ghost. He was the truth they couldn't burn away. I looked through the papers. It wasn't just property deeds. It was a list of names, high-ranking officials, judges, and developers who had all benefited from the Mark Sterling identity's various iterations. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a criminal empire. Suddenly, the door to the shed creaked open. I froze, glass shards of the documents cutting into my hands. "It's over, Lily." Mark stood in the doorway. He was alone. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and his hands were stained with something dark. He wasn't holding a gun. He was holding a lighter. "You have your mother's habit of hiding in small spaces," he said softly. "It makes the cleanup so much easier." "My father." "I killed a shadow," Mark replied, stepping into the shed. "And now, I'm going to kill the last witness. Give me the recorder, and I'll make sure you don't feel the heat." I stood up, backing toward the small window. "The world already knows, Mark, or whatever your name is. I sent the files from my phone before I entered the tunnel. Every major news outlet in the country has the Jansen inheritance folder in their inbox. It was a bluff. The signal in the tunnel had been non-existent. But I saw him hesitate. His thumb flicked the lighter open. The flame danced in his eyes. "You're lying," he snarled. "Am I? Check your phone." "Oh wait, you can't. The signal jammer your men set up, it works both ways." In that moment of hesitation, a figure lunged from the shadows behind the shed. It was my mother. She wasn't weak. She wasn't terrified. She was holding the heavy iron shovel she had used for years in her garden. She swung with a ferocity that could only come from 2 decades of suppressed rage. The blow caught Mark across the temple, sending him crashing into the workbench. The lighter flew from his hand, sparking against a can of turpentine. "Lily, run!" my mother screamed. The shed ignited in a roar of orange and yellow. I grabbed my mother's hand, and we tumbled out into the grass as the small structure became a funeral pyre for the lies that had defined our lives. As the sirens finally began to wail in the distance, the real police, called by the neighbors who saw the blaze, I looked back. The estate was lit up, but the Mark who had tried to claim me was gone. Months later, the headlines called it the unmasking of the century. The sterling name was stripped away, revealing a web of corruption that went back decades. My father's body was never found in the ruins of the library. But sometimes, when I walk through the new gardens my mother and I planted, I find a single white rose left on the doorstep. I didn't walk down the aisle that day. I walked into a fire. And for the first time in my life, I am finally standing in the light. I'm curious, where and at what time did you finish this story? Let me know in the comments below. If you found out your entire life was built on a secret identity, would you run away or stay and fight for the truth? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe to LilyCalmStories for more deep, realistic mysteries. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter.